Why do you think they put the C before his birthday? What did we learn about him in paragraph 1?
That he was a slave.
He was a slave. So oftentimes slaves are captured and then they don't really know like a lot about their origin. Okay, so that's why. Equiano was born a chief's son in what's now present-day Nigeria. He was captured at 11 and sold as a slave to a series of African masters before making the miserable journey to the Americas known as the Middle Passage. So that's something some students are often surprised by. Like there were Africans who had slaves as well. Okay, have you heard of the Middle Passage before?
Yeah.
When they took, like you've seen, like the ships probably. That's what we're going to focus on this narrative, his journey right on that ship. It says in 1766, after 21 years as a slave, Equiano bought back his freedom and moved to London in 1789 as a public debate over abolishing the slave trade began in Britain. Equiano wrote, self-published, and promoted his narrative. His life story exposed the cruelty of the slave trade and made him an important public figure. He died in 1797, just 10 years before Britain abolished the slave trade. So let's look at number 1 together. Why do you think Equiano so fiercely promoted his slave narrative? What was his ultimate goal? It says he's trying to expose something. What is he trying to expose? And expose just means like shed to light. He wants to reveal something about slavery.
Abolishing
That's his ultimate goal. Okay, so keep the abolishment in mind. But how does he think he's going to get people to be on his side and want to abolish it? Think of look at what it shows about the slave narrative. So what does a slave narrative do? What does it show about slavery? Look right here.
You guys said it shows what he did as a slave.
Yeah, like the experiences he went through as a slave. Are these good experiences? Are these things anyone wants to have happen to them? No. So he wants to expose the horrors and cruelty of slavery in hopes of getting it abolished. So getting it abolished is his main goal, right? Right, so let's go through your vocab words for this passage. Okay, we have the word loathsome. It's an adjective meaning hateful. Pestilential, adjective meaning it's likely to cause disease. Copious is an adjective that just means plentiful, like a lot of something. Improvident is an adjective meaning short-sighted. Avarice is a noun that means greed. What's it mean to be greedy?
Like want a lot.
Yeah, you want a lot. Like you are never satisfied with what you have. Conducted is a verb that means to lead. Custody is a noun, keeping, to have possession of. And a parcel is a noun, that's a thing wrapped in paper in order to be sent by mail. You probably heard that, like a parcel of paper. So for number 2, you're just choosing one of these words and using it correctly in a sentence. So if you choose like avarice, a noun, make sure you're using it as a noun, okay? Make sure you're using it in the correct form. Here we go. Excerpt 1. At last, when the ship we were in had got in all her cargo, they made ready with many fearful noises, and we were all put under deck so that we could not see how they managed the vessel. But this disappointment was the least of my sorrow. The stench of the hold while we were on the coast was so intolerably loathsome that it was dangerous to remain there for any time, and some of us have been permitted to stay on deck for the fresh air. But now that the whole ship's cargo were confined together, it became absolutely pestilential. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself, almost suffocated us. This produced copious perspiration, so that the air soon became unfit for respiration, from a variety of loathsome smells, and brought on a sickness among the slaves, of which many died, thus falling victim to the improvident avarice, as I may call it, of their purchasers. This wretched situation was again aggravated by the galling of the chains, now becomes insupportable, and the filth of the necessary tubs into which children often fell, and were almost suffocated. The shrieks of the women and the groans of the dying rendered the whole scene horrible, almost inconceivable. Okay, so imagery, let's look at number 3. That's a device that appeals to our 5 senses. So within this passage, what's something like we can smell? We're going to highlight that yellow. What smell does he describe?
Is shrieks of the woman.
So shrieks, that's like a scream, like, ah! So what one would that be?
Wait.
Yep, that would be hearing. So let's highlight the shrieks of the women in blue. Okay, and then orange is going to be feel. So if you see something that relates to smell, hearing, or feeling, let me know and we'll highlight. What's the smell? Consider the situation that they're in. It's hot outside. They're in a crowded ship, like on top of each other. What's going to happen if you're crowded and you're in the heat?
People start sweating.
People start sweating. So look at where it says we have copious perspirations. That just means sweat. So lots of BO there. Let's highlight that yellow. Okay. What's something else that we can hear? Uh-huh. Good. Groans of the dying. And again, like the smell's so bad that people are getting sick and dying. Like that's how bad the smells are. Okay. Something that you can like feel. I like this one. They're so crowded they barely had room to turn around. That almost suffocated us. You can kind of feel that difficulty breathing. Do you feel comfortable highlighting?
Yeah.
Okay. I know it takes a little while on a Chromebook. It's not as easy. Let's look at number 4. It says, what do all of these images, so all of those like smells, sounds, feelings, what do they all emphasize about the ship?
That it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah. Emphasize the unpleasantness of the ship. Very good. All right. Diction is a fancy word. That's a rhetorical device. What does diction kind of sound like? Dictionary. So that's just a fancy word for author's word choice. So it says, what is the cargo on the ship? He uses that word several times. I'm going to highlight it just so it's easy to find. Okay, what's the cargo on the ship that he's referring to? The whole ship's cargo were confined together. Once he got all the cargo on the ship, what is the cargo on the ship?
It's not the people.
It's the people. It's the slaves, right? Good. Okay. Why do you think he chooses that word? When you usually think of cargo, what do you think of? Yeah, like maybe cars. I don't know, like anything basically that gets shipped to Walmart, like things of toilet paper, right? Anything like that. So why does he use that word? What is he trying to emphasize about the way African Americans were viewed?
That they're being shipped.
Yeah, are they like viewed as humans?
What?
Are they being viewed like as humans, as equal humans? No, like for the slave traders, they view the African Americans as like property that can be used to make a profit, right? They do not see them as humans at all. Okay. Did you at all get to rhetorical appeals last year with your sophomore teacher? Like ethos, pathos, logos?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Do you remember what pathos is? Remember, ethos is an appeal to credibility, logos is an appeal to logic, and then pathos is an appeal to, any idea?
Physical stuff.
Emotion. Okay, so something that would make you feel a strong emotion. So it can be angry, sad, excited, scared, any emotion that's going to be in a field to pathos. So I'm going to show you which one I think is the strongest, and then I want you to see if you know what he's saying here. Okay? He says, in the filth of the necessary tub into which children often almost fell and were almost suffocated. That to me is like the most horrifying. Like, mainly because it's like children and they're so innocent, you know what I mean? But do you know what these necessary tubs are? So think they're all stuck underneath the ship, crowded together, right? This journey takes weeks to complete. What do you need to do? What does your body need to do all the time?
Bathe.
Bathe, but they're not letting them bathe, right? They stink. What do? You drink some water and then you pee, right? You go to the bathroom. You go number two. That's what's happening here. Think of like big porta potty tubs, right? And then it's so crowded, like people are knocking into you and pushing you, and the kids aren't strong enough to like hold their balance, so they get like tossed into fecal matter, right? Like they are literally like, imagine getting a swirly in a porta potty, right? How disgusting that would be. That's what's happening to these kids, and like they're almost suffocating. It's so bad. Okay, so um, pick which one you think is the strongest. To me, this one's the worst because like the poop situation's so gross and the kids are innocent, right? So the kids nearly dying in fecal matter is extra horrible. Okay, that's what I think. But again, if you think something else is worse, like if the smells are the worst to you, if the shrieks are the worst to you, whatever you think. All right, number 7, it says, why would it have been in the interest of the slave traders to treat the slaves better? So, right, the stench is so bad that they're getting sick. And what's happening to some of these slaves? They get so sick that they die. So, why would it have been in the interest of the slave traders to treat the slaves better? Look at what they call the slave traders. They're victims to the improvident avarice. Do you remember what avarice is? Greed. So the slave traders are greedy people. They want money. So why would it have been smarter for the slave traders to be kinder to the slaves and to give them kind of better conditions?
So they can survive.
So they can survive, because what are the slave traders going to do to them?
They're
What,
gonna,
once they get to their destination, what's going to happen to all the slaves?
they have to go work for that.
Well, they're going to be sold to work for someone else,
Yeah.
right? So they're losing out on money because they're not treating them better, okay? So number 8 asks, name a fictional character notorious for his or her avarice. And avarice, remember, is greed. So notorious means like famous, but for a bad quality. So think of a fictional character or a character from a movie, cartoon that's known for being greedy.
Um,
Just Mr. Krabs, right? That's his
yeah.
name? Okay, yeah, that's who I'm going with. Mr. Krabs. If you can think of someone else, go for it. Mr. Krabs. He's one I know. Oh, Mr. Krabs. Excerpt number 2. Equiano says, one day they had taken a number of fishes. Okay. Remember, Equiano is one of the slaves. So when he says they had taken one of the fishes, who's he referring to?
The other slaves or
Not the
the
other
people that
slaves,
take
the,
care
the
of them?
slave traders, right? So he said they had taken a number of fishes, and then when they had killed and satisfied themselves with as many as they thought fit, to our astonishment who were on deck, rather than give any of us them to us to eat as we expected, they tossed the remaining fish into the sea again, although we begged and prayed for some as well as we could, but in vain. So the slave traders, they caught a bunch of fish, ate a bunch of fish, got stuffed to the max, right? And instead of sharing food to the African slaves on board who are starving, right? Like the African slaves are literally begging and praying for fish. They just toss them over. What does that emphasize about these slave masters? Yeah, they're just mean people. Like there's no benefit to them not to share those fish, right? They're just going out of their way to be rude. Um, it says some of the hungry slaves tried to get fish in secret. They were discovered and whipped. Then three desperate slaves jumped into the sea. The others were immediately put below deck. Two of the slaves drowned. The third was rescued and beaten unmercifully. Okay, so number 9, how does this excerpt emphasize the cruelty of the slave traders? What didn't they do? Right, they wouldn't share the fish. Okay, as far as achieving his purpose, look at number 10. This was very smart. It says, why do you think Equiano includes the detail of slaves praying? So he's writing this during the Puritan period. What's the most important thing to Puritans? God, right? God is the most important. So what do you think he's trying to say by saying, like, we were praying? What's he suggesting about slavery? What does he want these Christian people, like these quote unquote good Christians, to realize? That slaves are also good people, right? Some of these slaves are Christians as well, and he's trying to say, like, this is very unchristian to be treating people like property. Okay, right? God wants you to treat people accordingly, and they are not doing that. So this is definitely sinful of them. He wants them to realize that. Last one in this section, it says, why do you think the slave traders wanted to rescue the slaves that jumped into the sea? Okay, first of all, what were the slaves trying to do? Not just get food. It's not like they're going to be able to bop back onto the ship. Well, and they're in the middle of the ocean. Are they really going to be able to swim anywhere? Things are so bad that they're wanting to kill themselves, right? So this is what they were trying to do. So why would the slave traders want to rescue them?
So they can sell them.
Right, exactly. So they can sell them, right? The slave traders are concerned with their profits. Good. Answer number 3. During our passage, I first saw flying fishes, which surprised me very much. They used frequently to fly across the ship, and many of them fell on deck. I also now first saw the use of a quadrant, so like a compass. I'd often with astonishment seen the mariners make observations with it, and I could not think what it meant. They at last took notice of my surprise, and one of them, willing to increase it, as well as to gratify my curiosity, made me one day look through it. The clouds appeared to me to be land, which disappeared as they passed along. This heightened my wonder, and I was now more persuaded than ever that I was in another world, and that everything about me was magic. So 12 asks, why do you think Equiano thinks he's surrounded by magic? This is kind of a harder one.
Stuff that usually wouldn't happen before.
Well, and not things that wouldn't happen to like normal people. He's from Africa, so these things are just not a part of his culture, right? Flying fish aren't around Africa. They don't have quadrants in Africa. So he's just seeing things for the first time. So this shows and is emphasizing the different cultures, right, between the slave traders and the slaves themselves. Um, in the full version of this text, like when he's first boarding, he's like terrified. And he's most terrified because he's seeing these slave traders and they're white. He like mentions the look of their skin, like how their hair is different. He's never seen a white person before, right? So that makes it even more shocking. He's like, oh my God, these are like ghosts. Like he's never seen a white person before. So like just the kind of unknown aspect of it heightens his fear even more. Okay. Excerpt 4. The ship anchored off Bridgetown, the capital of the island of Barbados in the West Indies. Merchants and planters, not plants, sorry, planters, came on board to examine the slaves. The slaves on the ship were fearful, but some older slaves came from the land to reassure them. Finally, the slaves went ashore. It says, we were conducted immediately to the merchant's yard, where we were all pent up together like many sheep in a fold, without regard to sex or age. We were not many days in the merchant's custody before we were sold their usual manner, which is this: on a signal, so like a gunshot or a bell, as the beat of a drum, in this case it's a drum, the buyers rush at once into the yard where the slaves are confined and make choice of the parcel they like best. So 13 is asking you to find a simile. Do you remember what a simile is without looking? a comparison that uses like or as. So do you see that? Highlight our simile.
Does it matter what color?
Nope. Unless I say what color. I only like really make you pick a color if there's several annotation tasks in one. What's he compare them to? He says we were all pent up like what?
Oh, I put X or H. Is that?
No, because we have to look like or as. So we were all pent up together like so many sheep in a fold. So what are the slaves being compared to?
Sheep.
Sheep, like animals. So look at the question. It says, what is the simile suggesting about about how the slaves were treated? Were they treated like people? Humanely? No, they were being treated like animals. Okay. Look at this word rush. So diction again is author's word choice. Think of why he chose this word rush. What is this telling us about the buyers if they are rushing into this slave auction? Why would someone rush? Like when I'm at Six Flags, I am rushing to the Batman. I am rushing to Mr. Freeze. Why?
Because they're excited.
Yeah, they're excited, which is disgusting because what are they doing? They're buying human property, right? So that again is emphasizing just how like horrible the slaves are treated, right? People are excited to buy them. Right? Do you remember what parcel means? That was one of the vocab words. Mailman, the mailman carries a parcel. It's like a package, okay? So it says, examine the word parcel. What is this metaphor suggesting about the way the slaves were treated? So again, the buyers rushed into the yard and made choice of the parcel they like best. Again, they're not treated like what? Right. Okay. And remember, he used that word cargo earlier to achieve that same purpose. Okay. Last one. It says, what do you think the public of Equiano State learned about the accursed trade of slavery that it may not have known before reading this narrative? What are some of the cruelties do you think it exposed? Like what stood out the most to you? Let's pick three things that were particularly shocking.
Um, the stink of the people.
Okay. The stench, the smell, good. What else?
The, I guess, them throwing fish
Okay.
over the ocean.
Like that they weren't given enough food, right? All right, that's pretty torturous. Um, the extent of the greed, maybe, of the slave traders. Again, a lot of what they're doing is just to be cruel for cruelty's sake, right? All right, do you have any questions about that?